So, you've got DynamoDB. It's an incredibly powerful, scalable, and super fast NoSQL database. But, all that power doesn't mean a whole lot if actually connecting your application to it feels like a total chore. For developers, the real question isn't if you should use DynamoDB, but how you should get your code to talk to it. So, how do you actually bridge that gap? On one hand, you've got your beautifully crafted application logic. On the other, you have this absolute powerhouse of a database. It's not just about slinging data back and forth. It's about getting them to speak the same language, and to do it efficiently and, without pulling your hair out. Well, the answer is the AWS SDK, the Software Development Kit. Think of it as your bridge to the cloud. But here's the interesting part. It's not just one single bridge. The SDK actually gives you several different ways to interact with DynamoDB, and each one comes with its own level of abstraction, its own strengths, and its own trade-offs. Okay, so here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we're going to look at the core problem developers face. Then we're going to climb this ladder of abstraction, starting at the very bottom with the low-level API. From there, we'll move up to the much friendlier document model, and then to the top-tier object persistence model. And finally, we'll put it all together to help you choose the right level for your project. So, what is this fundamental challenge, this dilemma? It really all comes down to bridging the gap between how we like to write code and how databases actually store data. In our applications, we love working with objects, these rich, complex structures. But databases, even a NoSQL one like DynamoDB, they think in terms of tables and items. The official documentation actually has a great name for this, an impedance mismatch. It's that feeling of trying to shove a square peg into a round hole. What it usually means is developers end up writing a ton of extra boilerplate code just to translate their application objects into a format the database gets, and then translate it all back again. This is exactly where the different SDK interfaces come in to help us out. All right, let's start at the very foundation, level 1, the low-level API. You should think of this as the most direct, unfiltered line you can possibly have to the DynamoDB service itself. It gives you absolute power and really fine-grained control over every little thing. What this really means is that it's a direct one-to-one mapping to the raw HTTP API calls that happen under the hood. Every single AWS SDK, it doesn't matter what programming language you're using, has this foundational layer. It's the bedrock that everything else we're going to talk about is built on. With this interface, you get maximum control. Seriously, if there's a parameter buried deep in the DynamoDB API documentation, you can tweak it right here. The methods you call, like getItem, are a direct mirror of the underlying API, so there are no surprises. But, and this is a big but, it is incredibly verbose. Your code can get pretty noisy pretty fast. And this slide shows you exactly what we mean by verbose. You can't just send a value like Fido. Oh no. You have to wrap it up in this attribute value object and explicitly tell DynamoDB, hey, just so you know, this is a string, by using that S data type descriptor. And you have to do this for every single attribute. All that noisy, verbose code, well, that's exactly the problem that level 2, the document model, is designed to solve. This is our first step up that ladder of abstraction, and it offers a much simpler, more intuitive way to handle your data. The big idea here, the key innovation, is that the document interface completely removes the need to specify all those data type descriptors. The SDK is now smart enough to figure out the data types from the data itself. This makes the whole experience feel a lot more like you're just working with native JSON or dictionaries in whatever language you're using. So what this means for you, the developer, is a way cleaner experience. No more manual data typing. You can build up your items using familiar structures, and the SDK just handles all the translation for you. This dramatically cuts down on the amount of boilerplate code you have to write for basic CRUD operations. Your create, read, update, and delete stuff. And this just illustrates the difference perfectly. Look at the left side with the low-level API. You're manually building every single piece of that request. But then look at the right. With the document API, you just get your table and say, hey, get me the item with this key. It is so much cleaner, so much more readable. It's a huge improvement. Okay, so if the document model was about reducing boilerplate, level 3 is about pretty much eliminating it. This is the object persistence model, the highest level of abstraction. And for a lot of application developers, this is the holy grail. It lets you stop thinking about database tables and just work directly with your application's own objects. This model is what really solves that impedance mismatch problem we talked about at the beginning. You just define a mapping between your code's classes, like a customer class or a product class, and your DynamoDB tables. Once you set that mapping up, the SDK takes over and handles all the low-level translation for you automatically. And the result is code that just feels, well, natural. It's truly object-centric. You're not calling some databasey thing like put item. You're just calling save on your object instance. This is all made possible by a clever mapping technique, usually done with special tags called annotations right in your code, which gives you the absolute maximum level of convenience. So what does this mapping actually look like? Well, in a language like Java, for example, it's done with these annotations. You just tag your class with @DynamoDB table to link it to a table. You mark your unique ID field, what DynamoDB calls the partition key or hash key, with @DynamoDB hash key. This is really the magic that tells the SDK exactly how to translate your object into a DynamoDB item and back again. And here is the payoff for that little bit of one-time setup. A database write operation that might have been dozens of lines of code with a low-level API is now reduced to a single, beautiful, intuitive line of code, just mapper.saveItem. It's clean, it's simple, and it's incredibly powerful. Okay, so we've climbed the ladder. We've seen all three levels, from maximum control all the way up to maximum convenience. So the big question is, how do you choose? Which one is the right tool for your specific job? Let's break it down. You're going to want to reach for the low-level interface when you need that absolute fine-grained control. Maybe you're building a database migration tool, or you need to access a brand new cutting-edge API feature. The document interface is a fantastic middle ground. It's perfect when your data is more schemaless or JSON-like, and you just want to simplify your basic operations without committing to a rigid object model. And finally, for most application development, where you have a well-defined data model and your main goal is to develop rapidly, the object persistence model is almost always the way to go. So here's the bottom line. The most important thing to remember: there is no single best interface. It's really a spectrum of trade-offs between control and convenience. The right choice depends entirely on the specific task you're trying to accomplish, and honestly, the development style of your team. By understanding these different levels of abstraction, you've basically equipped yourself with a powerful toolkit for working with one of the world's most capable databases. So the only real question left is, what are you going to build with it?